yellow tomatoes actually have more acid than red.
Oh, my goodness. Welcome to Tim's Take, and today we have our very special guest, Dr. David Trinkline. He has taught probably hundreds, if not thousands of students in your career.
At least.
And now he's extension only.
Right.
But his influence is marked throughout our state and continues to be. And we're so excited about probably one of the favorite subjects of both of us is tomatoes.
Correct. Tomatoes have been very good to me.
Yeah.
From a career standpoint, from an educational standpoint, and so forth. And out of respect to them, frankly, I don't eat tomatoes, but I do know something about a little bit about growing them.
And I think tomatoes are acquired taste.
Well, they happen to be America's #1 home garden vegetable.
Wow.
It's been that way for about 15 years. You know, when home gardeners are asked what's the one crop that you put out, the first thing on the list is always tomato.
And probably sweet corn is there, but it just takes so much room. Where tomato, a few plants can.
And it's a matter of, I think, what we're going to discuss today, eating quality.
That's right.
I didn't say taste because taste is more than just your tongue. But on the other hand, the table quality of homegrown vine-ripened tomatoes is so much greater than those that are picked abroad. And abroad often means in other countries, shipped green and then artificially colored. Ripened is perhaps too much of a complimentary term, but they're exposed to a gas called ethylene, which causes the lycopene, the red pigment, to form. It doesn't form any more sugars or so forth, and that's why home garden tomatoes are so favored.
Wow. So let's talk about what makes a tomato not taste good, but what'd you say?
Well, good table quality.
Okay.
Can we say table quality? First of all, we want to say that we've all heard the adage, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And that is very true also for the taste of things or the table quality of things. Give you an example. I went to grad school with an Englishman, and his idea of a good tomato was something small, seedy, and very sour.
Really?
Let's remember, though, and they call them chips, not fries, but the English put vinegar on their fries. We put ketchup on our fries, which is a bit sweeter. So it's very much an individual type of thing. But across the board, most people would suggest that tomatoes that have a relatively high acid and sugar content taste good to them. There are a number of factors that go into the table quality of a tomato. Two of the major factors would be the sugar to acid ratio. The sugars being primarily fructose and glucose, and the acids being primarily citric acid, malic acid, and so forth. Tomatoes that, when tested, are found to have low sugar and low acid, have almost no flavor, no taste. Low sugar and high acid, my English friend, sour. Low acid and high sugar, maybe a little bit bland.
Even though they're sweet.
Okay. Sweet, but bland, and people want that sharp. So high sugar and high acid across the board is what is initially sought after by plant breeders who are more and more looking toward improving table quality as they improve a tomato. Years ago, it was a matter of improving yield, and yield was everything. But now I think the recognition is that it had better taste good or people aren't going to buy it. And no matter then how much it yields, unless you sell it to somebody who doesn't know what it is, they're only going to buy it one time. So table quality or flavor has been emphasized in the development of tomatoes over about the last 25 years or so.
Okay. So even with our garden type tomatoes like our Better Boys and Celebrity, which were probably developed more than 25 years ago.
Celebrity, yes. Better Boy, it's about 25 years.
Okay.
Right.
Or Big Boys.
A Big Boy is 50 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we grew up.
That's right. The first F1 hybrid available was Big Boy.
Oh, is that right?
Correct.
And that was more for probably yield, you think then?
Hybrid vigor.
Uh-huh.
And that would imply yield as well. Now, with hybrid vigor comes other things that Big Boy epitomized. Greater uniformity, plant to plant to plant, and fruit to fruit to fruit. Greater ability to incorporate disease resistance, although Big Boy doesn't have that much. And essentially just a higher yielding, more profitable tomato. And because of the vigor, a tomato that would be easier to grow in the home garden. And today, Big Boy is still one of the top sellers, even though arguably there are others that might be better. And I think you mentioned Better Boy.
Yes.
That's a takeoff on the Big Boy. The company owns the trademark to both of them, so they can do that. But Better Boy is better from the standpoint that it has more disease resistance built into it. When it comes to tomatoes, we talk about the disease-resistant package. And this is a series of letters that follow the name. Example being Better Boy is VFN. V stands for verticillium wilt, F for fusarium wilt, and N for nematodes. It is genetically resistant to all three of those. So you have an advantage right away in growing Better Boy VFN over Big Boy because there are diseases that Better Boy will not contract, which Big Boy, unfortunately, still will, the verticillium and the nematode. As a point of interest, the gene that is responsible for fusarium resistance is called the I gene, which stands for immune. That was discovered by a Dr. Tucker here at the University of Missouri in the 1940s. And anybody familiar with the university knows that the biology department is located in Tucker Hall. It's a single gene dominant, meaning that only one copy of the gene is needed to gain immunity to two different strains of fusarium that are prevalent here in the United States. Again, folks who prefer heirlooms, that's fine. It's up to them. But you will not find an heirloom that is resistant to hardly any diseases, especially, in this case, fusarium or the verticillium, nematodes, tobacco mosaic, all things that we now can find very good varieties that are genetically resistant.
Do we give up some flavor when we get that?
Oh, that's a good point, Tim. A number of years ago, a gentleman wrote a book called Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times. It was a scathing indictment, this was back in the early 60s, against federally funding research done by universities that really only benefited the bottom line profit of growers and didn't keep the consumer in mind. The title, Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times, came from the fact that many universities were working to develop a tomato that was about as hard as a rock, that it could ship very well for long distances and then be artificially colored, I'll not say ripened, but colored, 1,000, 2,000 miles away. Unfortunately, while doing those kinds of improvements, taste also was kind of secondary to whatever yield or whatever else. Not anymore. And you will usually find that the newer cultivars, in their description, all suggest that they were selected for, in addition to other things, outstanding table quality. And that, I think, is something that researchers did react to hard tomatoes, hard times. And the fact of life is that people are going to buy the seeds of tomatoes or the plants from tomato seeds that they know will produce more flavorful tomatoes in their home garden.
So getting back, so the very first thing we need to do is get a tomato variety that is flavorful. And you said there are like 20 genes that contribute to this?
Well, let's back up.
Okay.
A tomato can only be as flavorful as its genetic makeup will allow.
Right.
In Genetics 101, you learn the equation I equals H times Z. Every individual, plant or animal, is what they are because of their hereditary makeup in the environment in which that makeup is allowed to express itself. From the standpoint of hereditary makeup, we've already touched upon sugars and acids. The tomato variety has got to have the genetic makeup to produce sugars and acids. And as such, we now know that there is much more than just sugar and acid that goes into tomato flavor. Your mention of 20 reflects the work of, his name is Dr. Harry Klee. He's a distinguished professor of horticulture at the University of Florida, Gainesville. He has spent the last 10 years researching volatile compounds that add to tomato flavor. It's a fact of life that taste is the result of our tongue. And we're sweet, salty, bitter, sweet, salty, bitter, sour. There's a new one now. It's called savory. So we have a fifth taste, but that's all on our tongue.
Wow.
Taste buds, which, depending on the source that you quote, humans have between 10 and 20,000 taste buds. As we chew a tomato, there are volatile flavor compounds that are released, which are taken into our olfactory sense through...
That's our smell.
Our smell through the back of our mouth.
Really?
Yes. I don't know the name of the structure, but it's the post-nasal olfactory absorption of things. In other words, after the nose, they enter into the nerve system that feeds to the sensory part of the brain that tells us when things smell good. And Dr. Klee has identified about 200 compounds in plants that add to good flavor, volatile compounds. Only about 20 of them are found in tomato. So that's the 20.
Okay. About 10% of all the volatile compounds that add to flavor.
Correct, are found in tomato.
Okay.
And unfortunately, for the sake of improving the taste of tomato, these compounds are very complex, biochemically speaking, meaning that they're probably under the inheritance of multiple genes and not just one gene like Fusarium wilt resistance. So it's going to take some time for his work to come to fruition so as to transfer the genetic ability for a tomato to manufacture those 20 volatile compounds in adequate number in order for them to be called more flavorful. Now, again, that would depend on the individual's preference.
Now, you mentioned earlier how people like heirloom tomatoes.
Exactly.
Do they have more of these?
You bring up a very interesting point. Dr. Klee started his research by looking at heirlooms and asking people to rank wedges of sliced heirloom tomatoes, which ones they liked the best, which ones they liked the least. It was then from the ones that they liked the most that he delved into the realm of volatile flavor compounds. So yes, heirlooms do, in spite of their other faults, and you probably can tell I'm not a big fan of heirlooms, but in spite of their other faults, the matter of will they taste better probably is true.
Okay.
But again, that's in the, I shouldn't say tongue, but the tongue in the olfactory sense, the nose of the beholder.
Oh, great. Okay. So when we used to have our tomato festival,
Right,
we would have folks give them a rating.
right.
And you could just about look at it. Cherry tomatoes were the highest, followed by the heirlooms. And then their garden varieties. And then at the bottom were going to be our shipped ones, our Florida 41s, and
Right.
the hard balls.
Yeah.
So what do cherry tomatoes have that makes them so good?
That, too, is very interesting and has just been discovered. We mentioned that the two primary sugars in the tomato are glucose and fructose. On the sweetness scale, with sucrose, table sugar, being 100, fructose measures about 120. It was found very recently that cherry tomatoes are sweeter because they have more sugar in the fructose form than in the glucose form. So the perception of them being tastier is absolutely true.
Because they're sweeter.
They're sweeter, they have more fructose. And as such, I know fructose gets kind of a bad rap, high fructose corn syrup and so forth. But nonetheless, high fructose in a tomato really isn't a bad thing.
It's naturally produced.
It's naturally produced. You're not going to overconsume it. It's not in like soda and so forth. So it does add to the flavor and the eating enjoyment. But I'm sure that somewhere there's somebody researching, well, how do I get those genes that cause cherry tomatoes to make more fructose than glucose into our garden varieties, our slicers, and so forth.
Now, you mentioned the breeding. University of Florida, they developed Tasty Lee. And isn't that supposed to be this?
Well, that was done. Tasty Lee was the first variety released that had what's called the crimson gene. And whether or not it was considered to be more tasty by others, I don't know. But Tasty Lee represented a huge advance in having a slicing-sized tomato, and it wasn't really that big, maybe 6 ounces.
Right.
That had about 60% more lycopene,
which is red.
Normal, the red pigment. And lycopene happens to be a phytonutrient that we know is very beneficial for the likes of heart health and so forth. Others have jumped on this, and we now have cultivars that were kind of commonplace that are now increased lycopene. They have the crimson gene. The difficulty here, not getting too deep in the weeds in genetics, that is a single gene, but it's recessive. So you have to have 2 recessive doses of it incorporated into one tomato, and that's usually a hybrid, in order for it to be crimson gene possessive. A very good case in point, just last year, the breeders, or I should say the marketers, I assume the breeders, of Big Beef, which is a very, very popular and deservedly so home garden variety, released Big Beef Plus. And the plus stands for a couple of things. One of them, it's also now resistant to a couple of more diseases. The diseases escape my mind. It also has the crimson gene. So when you cut it open, it's just like you can't believe a tomato can be that red. And it just, I think there might be some amount of psychological suggestion here that, man, that looks good. They taste it because supposedly Big Beef Plus also has improved flavor.
Well, and I think there's 4 of those pluses. I think Celebrity is one of them also.
I understand from a seed company that I correspond with that there, over the last 2 years, were 8 tomato varieties.
There's 8
that have been improved and are going to be, or already are, their name plus or their name improved, like Celebrity Plus or Big Beef Plus or so forth.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. And maybe we can compare the taste of those. What's also interesting is you mentioned the heirlooms not have other issues, but now I'm seeing either a hybrid version of an heirloom or
Correct.
a marriage. They call it a marriage of the heirlooms.
Right. I think commercially they're known as heirloom influence.
Okay.
Meaning that somewhere in the parentage of, and these are hybrids,
Okay.
there would be an heirloom. Example being Brandywine. And to give you an example of a very popular heirloom influence, Martha Washington, typically at taste tests, often scores very high or wins the taste testing. Now, I don't know that there were cherry tomatoes included in the taste test or so forth, but those who develop would like to think that it was the influence of Brandywine in selecting for taste and bringing in those genes that contribute to sugar, acid, and volatile compounds, which we know are found in Brandywine, along with the breeding line, so to speak, to produce an F1 hybrid that has benefits that Brandywine doesn't have, but supposedly has taste that is almost like Brandywine.
So we get disease package, we get maybe more
Right.
yield, more consistency.
Correct.
All right.
One of the big faults in anybody who grows heirlooms would truthfully have to admit this. You mentioned the word water and they split. I mean, they absolutely have, and that's one of the, I suppose, attractive features, that heirlooms are not tough, if you will. They're easily chewed. Well, that's because their epidermis on the fruit is just paper thin, is not thin enough. It's very thin, and it cracks very easily.
But that compared to some of the ones they ship us, very thick.
Hard tomatoes, hard times. Correct.
Yes,
That's just
yes.
the opposite, and it represents going too far in the other direction. But it is true that heirlooms probably do contain more of these volatile flavor compounds, which Dr. Klee now is continuing to research. He spent his last 10 years doing this kind of research and publishing in some very scientific types of publications. But we still, as growers of tomatoes, have not quite reached the pinnacle from the standpoint of benefiting tremendously from his work. We're getting there. There are some that have been released that University of Florida gets a small royalty. Garden Gem is one. Garden Treasure is another. I think Garden Gem is a cherry type. Garden Treasure is a small slicer. but we're going to be seeing more tomatoes that have the parentage that these two have because of Dr. Klee's work.
Wonderful. Now, sometimes I've always heard that if you can't have a lot of acid, so you get yellow tomatoes and other ones. So if that's part of our taste, we're sacrificing some flavor, aren't we? When we go to different...
You bring up an interesting point, Tim. Research was done here by the late Dr. Vic Lambeth, University of Missouri, concerning the acidity of yellow tomatoes versus red. And I know there are many people who I cannot eat a red tomato. My mouth breaks out because of the acid, but I love yellow tomatoes. His research demonstrated the fact that yellow tomatoes actually have more acid than red.
Oh, my goodness.
It's just that they have more sugar, which masks the acid.
Oh, wow.
Now, whether that masks the action of acid in a person's mouth that's sensitive, or the power of suggestion that I'm eating a yellow tomato and my mouth is not supposed to hurt, makes the person feel more comfortable and so forth. But fact of life is yellow tomatoes do have acids just like red tomatoes, and some of them even more so.
To me, the least flavorful tomatoes are the white ones.
Well, right. And
low acid, low sugar.
Low acid, low sugar. They don't appear to be red. We're trained that a certain food should be a certain color. Just like I know there's some interest in blue potatoes, which I guess would be more helpful because they contain anthocyanin, which is an antioxidant. But I just can't get past eating blue mashed potatoes. I don't think I could do it. And from the standpoint of tomatoes, I think most people, if it's not red or maybe pink or yellow, certainly not white, it's not a tomato.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely love the dark tomatoes.
Right.
Whether they're heirloom or heirloom modified.
I suppose that color would come partially from some of these anthocyanins because lycopene can only make a tomato more red. And the darker purple or so forth, there has to be some anthocyanins or so forth involved. But that too would be, frankly, a healthier tomato from the standpoint of human consumption.
All right. This is it for Tim's Take, and we'll see you next week.